Federal data shows one of the places where those who are unhoused has grown the most is California's capital, Sacramento. Across the county, numbers increased by 68% in a 2-year period. The jump can be quite visible, with unhoused people often sleeping in the streets, in cars or in tents. Sacramento County District Attorney Thien Ho has grabbed national headlines for taking an unusual step to address this issue. In September, he filed a lawsuit against the city of Sacramento, saying it's created a public safety crisis by failing to enforce the law. He joins me now. DA Ho, welcome to Here and Now.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's quite an honor.
Could you tell me why it's a public safety crisis to have people sleeping in the streets and what you are hoping to do with this lawsuit?
Absolutely. We've actually seen a 250% increase in our homeless population in Sacramento in the last 7 years. And it's simply not compassionate. It's not compassionate for those that are living on the streets. We've seen families as well that are unable to go to the park because of needles strewn on a soccer field. It's not compassionate for a business to have to shut down as well.
So why a lawsuit? Because I understand you're not asking for money. You want to mandate the city to enforce existing laws, for example, to clear sidewalks and to ban camping in public places during the day. So why a lawsuit?
Because in the process of investigating this case, what we discovered is that in the last year, the city of Sacramento, the city attorney's office, has not prosecuted a single case revolving any of the homeless ordinances, the laws that are on the book. So really, it's to require the city to enforce the law and to do the things that they are required to do and that they are mandated to do.
So let me ask you, because you started by saying, you want it to be compassionate. I think some would say it sounds like you want to criminalize those who are living on the streets because they don't have any other options. It doesn't sound too compassionate to enforce the laws against people who don't have somewhere else to go.
When you look at those that have been chronically homeless, 8 out of 10 individuals that are chronically homeless are suffering from mental health and drug addiction. And the idea of enforcing the law is not to go ahead and criminalize or put people in jail, but instead get them into a treatment program. And let me give you an example. We had an individual that was committing theft every other day at Target. And so what we did was that individual was arrested, charged with those cases. And what we said to that individual is, look, you can do 300 days in jail or you can go into a drug treatment program, because that was the underlying issue. And so when they accepted treatment, we put them in the treatment program. And I would dismiss every single one of those cases.
As district attorney, you would dismiss those cases. So let me ask you, having lived in California myself and covered this issue in many different cities, one of the struggles that officials come up against is that some people don't want to move. They are offered alternatives and they don't want to move off the streets. How would you propose helping people like that if the city is to enforce some of the existing bans that are on the book, because they might then come before you in a criminal justice setting?
So, for example, the sheriff's department, and I think you bring up an excellent point, the sheriff here in Sacramento made contact with over 700 people and offered them services. Of those 700 people in the first 6 months of the year, only about less than a dozen people accept shelter and services. So how do we encourage those individuals to accept that? So San Diego has an interesting program, which is fairly effective and has reduced their unhoused population in the core of the city by upwards of 40%. So the first step is you have shelter. You offer the shelter. If the shelter is refused, there's a warning given. On the second occasion, there's a citation that is given. However, that citation can be waived and dismissed if the person accepts shelter. And on the third occasion, they're offered essentially shelter again, and if they refuse, they get cited for a misdemeanor. That will get dismissed if they accept shelter. In the same way that I gave the example of the individual that had committed all the thefts.
So one of the things that the city has raised is a case that was ruled on 5 years ago by the Ninth Circuit, Martin versus Boise,
Yes.
which makes it illegal to ban encampments unless there are enough shelter beds. for everyone. And from my understanding, Sacramento doesn't have that capacity. So if the court sides with you, wouldn't the city just end up in another potential legal battle?
First of all, that case has been misinterpreted and misused. What Martin versus Boise in the court said in that case was that you cannot outlaw camping in all places at all times unless you have shelter. But you can have restrictions. For example, you shouldn't have an encampment right outside a school. I know that Governor Newsom recently filed an amicus brief before the Supreme Court of the United States, essentially to overturn that case. And my office was the first DA's office to do the same as well. But there are plenty of ways, even within that case, to have effective policies to help our unhoused off the streets.
One part of your lawsuit that I found really interesting is also asking for transparency about how money is being spent. Because, as a California taxpayer and voter, I know that the residents of this state have approved a lot of money to try and build more housing, to try and take care of this. Yet it seems like the problem all over the state is growing. What do you think transparency in seeing how this money is being spent might show?
Well, first of all, in Sacramento, we spent roughly $200 million every year to deal with our unhoused population, and yet the numbers keep growing and growing and growing. So I've requested an audit of where the money is going. And also, we need data. We need data to show that if you are providing services, are those services effective? Are they working? If not, how can we change that? Sacramento, the city, started an audit process 2 years ago, and they're not even done with it. What's been going on for 2 years? Why is it taking so long?
Well, we'd love to stay in touch and hear how this goes, but should you be successful, what do you hope will happen? What's your best case scenario here, DA Ho?
The best case scenario is that we have public safety for all, those that are on the streets and off the streets.
Sacramento County District Attorney Thien Ho, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
And by the way, we also heard from the city of Sacramento, which says the lawsuit is deeply flawed. Officials are asking a judge to throw it out. A ruling is expected as soon as January.